Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast. I'm Cara, fundraising coach here at Donorbox. Many of our listeners join us regularly to get a bit of inspiration and learn from nonprofit organizations who are changing the world. Those on-the-ground efforts often wouldn't be possible without the behind-the-scenes efforts that hold all those together. Today, I'm joined by Jena Lynch of our Donorbox team for a more practical conversation about those behind-the-scenes efforts every nonprofit deals with. Jena works with many of our Donorbox organizations, helping them navigate the ins and outs of online fundraising, and she is the host of the Donorbox series on YouTube. Jena, you've also had professional experience from the nonprofit side too, right?
Thanks for that intro, Cara. And to answer your question, yes, I've always worked in nonprofit development with a focus on volunteer management, peer-to-peer fundraising, community engagement, and in-kind donations. And for those of you who are not familiar with Donorbox, we provide nonprofits with simple and effective tools to manage their online fundraising activities and connect with donors on a deeper level.
I love that we get to help nonprofits in their fundraising efforts every day. We have organizations that are really doing some terrific things in this world. And one thing I keep hearing over and over is that nonprofits across the board are losing donations. I think I read yesterday even that it's been about 10 years in a row that we've seen declines in donors. And so I know that's something almost all of our organizations are dealing with. And that's a lot of donors, and that's a lot of relationships too.
Yeah, these organizations are working tirelessly every day, delivering programs, services, but we find that many of them have an uphill battle and find engaging donors a little scary sometimes. Some organizations really struggle with this. And you and I have talked about this several times. Building a successful foundation for your organization totally hinges on how well you engage and build trust with your donors.
Trust can be so complex. It's a very complex topic, and many of us really can't even begin to understand what trust is in our world. How do you measure it? Can you measure it?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure you can measure it, but trust is definitely key to getting the first donation from a new supporter. And as the amount of the donation request increases, so does the level of donor trust needed for them to trust you with their hard-earned money.
That is a lot of trust. Donors are looking for organizations that will give them an opportunity to help change the world. I've always thought that. They want to make an impact, and I guess that means they're looking for an organization they can trust.
Yep, absolutely. And when they find this gem of an organization, they will also share your story with others and become more powerful, informed advocates for your mission, which is what everybody wants, right? So on top of this, they'll become more engaged with their own giving and more satisfied with their giving experience. And I find there's often this discord when connecting with donors, or worse, donors aren't connecting with the organization. And it all hinges on donor engagement. Trust is absolutely the crux of any nonprofit donor relationship. And without it, donors aren't likely to stick around. And if they don't stick around, it will become more difficult for you to raise money for your cause. I recently talked to a nonprofit peer that told me about the time they had a donor who made a really large gift to her organization, and then they just stopped giving altogether. The organization was surprised because they'd always thought this particular donor was happy with what they were doing and wanted to see the organization succeed. But when I asked about their relationship building efforts with their donors, it turned out that they had never even met this person. It kind of blew my mind. The organization didn't know anything about her interests, her hobbies outside of like her workplace. And she wasn't even connected with them or following them on social media. So how could she possibly be engaged with what they were doing? Like, what could they have done differently? And I think that this situation illustrates how important it is for nonprofits to build trusting relationships with their donors. Organizations that do this really well are making really good connections with their supporters and making them powerful partners for change in this world, I think.
You're right. They didn't see her, did they? They just kind of kept on doing what they were supposed to do in their mind, and they were not reversing the role and thinking about it from the donor perspective of
Yeah.
she's not catching what they're dropping on social media because she's not following them, or maybe she's not on social media. That's huge.
Yep.
From what you've seen in your own experience and with the organizations that you've worked with, what do you think, is there something that's the key to building trust?
In my experience, donors are really looking for nonprofits that are authentic and transparent, perfect or not. And there was actually a lot of conversation about this around being authentic and transparent at the AFP conference in May that you and I both attended. And I think that's the key to any relationship that we have in our lives, whether it's our donor, whether it's our friends. Being transparent and authentic is something everybody wants. What I mean by this is you don't need to share all of those nitty gritty details all of the time. I think that could be overwhelming or even boring. But I do think it's important to be direct about what your organization is up to. Like, don't hide from the fact that your organization has big, lofty goals, or that you've made mistakes along the way. Be honest about who you are, who your organization is, and what you stand for. And your donors will be more likely to trust you and want to continue that relationship with you. But I think what makes a huge difference in being is being intentional with committing time to these relationships, the organizations, between the organizations and their supporters and volunteers. So for the organizations, it's obviously very impactful when you're one-on-one with your supporter and you can learn more about them, what motivates them, and share where those might intersect with what you've got going on in your organization. I think that's really, really important.
So I think that might be easier said than done. We're stretched on time, all of us, right? Especially those who are running a nonprofit. We stitch together everything we have to do in a day. How can you make time to build these authentic relationships?
Well, I think you first, as a nonprofit leader, you need to make yourself available, right? You don't really need to go outside of the scope of things that you're doing already to do this. So ask yourself, okay, do you offer in-person serving opportunities? If so, great, serve alongside your active volunteers and donors. I'm not saying every single shift, but be there once a month or a couple times a quarter, and be accessible during your workday and at events, and be sure to interact with your supporters on social media and other channels too. I think it's really important to show face to your supporters wherever you can. It could be as simple as sending an iPhone video in your digital newsletter saying hi, but really showing up and being accessible is really, really important.
You mentioned interacting on social media. I think for many organizations that I've seen on LinkedIn and things like that, we're really good about pushing out content, but not always good about starting a conversation or following up on comments and things like that. So I really like that tip.
Absolutely.
So I've worked, this is a good example of what you were just saying, and it's what triggered in my mind when you were talking. I've worked closely with an organization in New York City, and we featured them a few weeks ago on the podcast. They're a mobile soup kitchen. They go directly into some of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. But once a month, their board and their development team and their executive director, they have serving Saturday, and they all go together. They are the volunteer team for that day. The board shows up, the development team shows up, they work together to provide this much needed food and community in the neighborhood. It builds unity among the board and the staff, but also with the beneficiaries of the people that they serve. So the people that are coming for some help, some resources for food, but it's one big community and everyone is engaging and they're getting the work done. And so this helps everyone get to know each other. And it really, like you just said, it adds that layer of accessibility. And I think it builds trust because they know each other better, right?
I love that. And like you said, that's kind of a win-win situation, getting to serve alongside your staff and your board. It's really great to build those relationships with your board, and then showing face out in the community is really, really great. So thanks for sharing. And that organization is doing an amazing job. I love that. So here's another idea, actually. Keep your supporters updated on all things related to your nonprofit. So both planned and impromptu. So again, we're talking a lot about social media. So through social media posts and responses, and through blog posts or newsletters as well. I think that's a really great way to do that. If you're not able to be out in person all the time, this is a great way to kind of supplement some of that. And I want organizations to know that they don't need to be afraid to think outside the box with these updates. What if you shared updates from a board member's perspective instead of your own, or staff? Or even better, do you have someone who receives your services who would share the impact from their own perspective? The key here, though, with these updates is relevance and recency, right? I said, don't share all the nitty-gritty details because it could be overwhelming or boring. This is kind of where that comes in. You want to make sure that all of your updates are relevant to your reader. So what you think is important isn't always what gets your supporters excited. And with that, you need to make sure that you keep up to date with fresh news and updates. So if you don't frequently improve the content or communications or methods to keep up with the times, then you'll miss those engagement opportunities, and may also be considered irrelevant, which nobody wants.
No, nobody wants to be irrelevant.
Nope.
No, you're lost in this world if you're irrelevant. I just read a post on LinkedIn this week. It talked about how hard it is sometimes to find a place on an organization's website to sign up for a newsletter. Don't you think it's important too for organizations to make it easy for their supporters to sign up and get alerts and updates without having to make them work so hard?
Absolutely. It is all about convenience and ease for all donors, all supporters. We have to work really hard to make sure that that experience for your supporters is as easy as convenient as possible. Absolutely. That's such a good point. So another great way, I think, is to make your donors feel like an insider and take them behind the scenes. Let them know what's going on at your organization, and things that they wouldn't necessarily see if it weren't for their contributions.
So behind the magic curtain, take them behind the magic curtain, right?
Yeah, exactly. This amazing magical experience. So for example, let's say the Humane Society shares a series of photos from their most recent animal rescue mission, showing their donors where their money goes and how much it helps animals in need. But most likely those donors won't be in that actual rescue vehicle or on that mission, but you can make them feel like they are. So you can use similar tactics by sharing photos or videos of summits or mission trips, or firsthand accounts from volunteers, maybe a volunteer takeover day, or even just some silly pictures of what happens when your team gets together for brainstorming fundraising ideas around the office, right? People love seeing these things. That's why even influencers are so popular on social media, because they're taking us behind the scenes and letting us see every little bit of their lives. You can do that as a nonprofit too, and it really helps people feel connected and like they know your organization. So I think that's kind of a cool thought. And another idea I love is sharing exclusive interviews with your executive director or a board member, a volunteer, or a community member to make your donors feel like they're really a part of the movement. I've also seen organizations do a really good job asking their supporters to be part of a community. So such as volunteer groups, of course, recurring givers clubs, and membership programs. I think it's really great for organizations to engage with their supporters through these types of community programs, especially memberships. I think that membership programs can be really beneficial for organizations because you are asking for monthly or weekly or a yearly commitment. And in return, so this is a little bit different from just donating. I say just, but of course, donating is amazing, but it's a little different from just donating because your supporters get something exclusive in return. And Donorbox memberships is actually something that we offer. I'm going to throw in a shameless plug here because it really, we found how important it can be for organizations and how great it can be as an engagement tool. And you can also offer some special insider or behind the scenes information through these avenues. So through these volunteer groups, through these recurring giving clubs, through these membership programs, you can offer special donors only or members only newsletter. So a newsletter made just for them. You can plan donor and volunteer recognition events throughout the year, and you should be doing this. And your board can be really instrumental in this planning. And these events do not have to be elaborate or expensive. And I always say, have your board do these things, have your board fundraise for you, have your board throw these events, have them throw cocktail hours, coffee hours. They should be engaging with your supporters as well. Or you can host an annual donor summit that includes an update on your organization by your directors or an outside speaker, followed by a reception where donors can give their own input and mingle with each other and other staff. And this can be in person or online. We're seeing a lot of both of these. So all this to say, the point here is to offer your supporters the option to be sustainers for your nonprofit. And again, you should be doing this. And with that, also offer them perks and experiences to go along with that status. I think that people really appreciate that extra little bit of effort and appreciation.
So you're making him feel special from everything from those, executive director interviews to these perks of membership and things like that. So those are, honestly, those are really simple things that could have a really big impact.
Meet Donorbox memberships, the smart, simple way to secure sustainable funding, scale donor support, and strengthen your relationships with them. And mobilize your mission with rewarding monthly and annual memberships. And make the most of your super supporter relationships with unlimited, customized membership tiers packed with perks. Donorbox memberships, a robust resource to wrap up retention and revenue management. Move your mission forward in minutes with a simple, no-cost setup. Donorbox memberships, helping you help others.
So I don't know if you know about this about me or not, but I'm kind of a database junkie, and I've worked with an organization that did a terrific job encouraging their development staff to take notes when they interact with individuals, so that anyone on staff can pick up where the organization left off last time they interacted with that supporter. And a big key to this is to use the CRM to track ongoing and outgoing communication, like the things that you just mentioned. And many of these CRMs have plugins with email providers and things like that. So any thoughts there on how to make that all work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is such an important thing to say. And yes, I did know you're a database junkie. I too love all things data. So with that, I think it's really important to take good notes and record them after you meet with the supporter. We all have short memories, or at least I do. I can't speak for everyone. So this will allow you or a member of your team to have seamless interactions with your supporters. And I cannot tell you how seen supporters have felt when I've remembered to ask them about their new grandbaby or a bread recipe, how that turned out, because who else was baking sourdough during quarantine? I baked so many loaves. Or how they enjoyed their vacation, or how that extra $10 they donated just on a whim provided a new backpack for a child entering kindergarten. These small interactions, these small steps can often get dropped. And it may seem like, oh, it's just a small thing, but it can truly be so transformational in keeping your relationships in sync. So I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Well, you are really good about making others feel seen, Jena. It's really awesome to see how that small investment of time can really make a big investment into the organizational asset of supporter trust that you've just
Mhm.
grown through, these steps you just shared with us. Um, so back to trust, I think building that donor trust is a long-term process. And I know that spending time with donors is really just one element of it. You've given us so many really great practical tips today that are easy to apply very quickly and built on year after year, engagement after engagement can really lead to a lot of success for a lot of organizations. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thanks so much, Cara. I so appreciate that. And I'll just say it again. I know it's easier said than done. And I'll leave you with this. It's not what we say, though. It's what we do. As an organization, it's so important to dedicate your time. Just like any relationship, time is so crucial to building that trust. And this means taking the time to learn more about who your supporters are behind that transaction, right? So learn what they care about, why your mission is important to them, and demonstrate that you care about what they think and show that you want to hear from them, and also make yourself available to serve alongside your supporters and be there when they need help or have a question. I think those are the few main points that we wanted to get across today.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are all terrific thoughts. And the way that I've been thinking through these as we've been talking, they're very easy steps and solutions and things that could be almost transactional. So I think it's important to not forget that these are humans behind these relationships. But I imagine a lot of organizations are, like I said earlier, are really trying to raise more with fewer donors. And summer is a great time to put some of these steps that we've talked about into action. And it would be really helpful to get donors ready to engage at year end too. So summer is a really good time to build these, investments into building trust for the organization so that when it is time at year end to ask for additional support, that these donors feel that they've been seen, that they've been heard, that they've been engaged. And I wonder, as you and I think about some educational component for Donorbox, maybe let's spend some time thinking on other ways that we can build trust with our supporters. And I would love to hear what our organizations think and what they're doing too. So I encourage anyone who's listening, email us at spotlights@donorbox.org and share with us, are you doing some really innovative things here too? And let's plan an upcoming webinar on this. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. I am so glad we were able to have this conversation today. It's been something that I've been thinking about a lot, something that we've been hearing about a lot. And I hope our listeners enjoyed it as much as we did. And I really do want to continue this conversation. So as Cara said, go ahead, reach out to us, and we'll plan to meet up via a webinar soon.
Again, the email address is spotlights@donorbox.org. That will go directly to me, and I'll be excited to hear about all that's going on in your world. Thank you. Thanks again, Jena, so much.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
The past couple of years have really limited our face-to-face engagement with our organization's best supporters. We hear from inspiring organizations with stories of on-the-ground action each week. And I hope you certainly enjoyed those. And I hope, too, that you've enjoyed going a little off-road with us today as we talk about some practical ways to engage with the supporters who keep our organizations going. From those volunteers who show up to serve, to those who advocate, and those who keep the engine running by financially supporting too. Jena really has a pulse on our organizations and what they're striving to accomplish each day. And I'm so grateful she shared some of her insights and actionable tips with us today, too. Every little bit adds up to contribute to the greater social good. And that's why the Nonprofit Podcast is here to amplify the positive social impact of so many great organizations around the globe. You'll find us here with a new, inspiring, informative, and always interesting interview every Thursday. So be sure to join us next week. Download this podcast or subscribe. And until next time, stay inspired.
The Nonprofit Podcast, Powered by Donorbox, helping you help others.